We live in a world full of experts. We live in a world full of experts. Where politicians use fear to generate power for themselves.
We've already had over 290 mass shootings this year. That's more mass shootings than days in the year.
Where our media feeds us with misinformation.
And according to the CDC, the #1 cause of death for children ages 1 to 19 in this country is gun-related violence.
Tropes.
Where it will literally tear out the inside of the body.
Where those who make the rules seem to know the very least. Scary terms used.
An arm known as a ghost gun because it skirts most federal gun laws.
Don't be like this guy. Listen to the Range Minded podcast and free your mind.
Kingdom Radio is now scheduling interviews for the 2024 season. Make sure you visit us online at whykingdomradio.com. Get busy.
Night Court with Joe Lanou live on X.
dressed, but the way she put on her makeup. Would your group not have accepted her as a black person, like a full-fledged black person, or would she still be the white girl
No,
that
you
act black?
still you she's a different situation because she's still 10 toes down on this whole. She's delusional. She still
No, she
she's
still
still 10
maintains it's
toes
the
down
devil.
on this
She
thing,
does.
right? But like, yes, you grew up in the culture, but we would accept you as being a white person who grew up in the culture. Like, you don't have to call yourself black. You're white. It's fine. You just grew up around the culture. But I don't think that's what she was doing, because it doesn't even seem like she grew up in the culture. She just like adopted it at some point and then just decided, okay, I'm gonna be black today.
Well,
And then
I
I'm
would
just
say,
going. So it's
Crystal,
different.
I would say that she didn't even adopt it. It was more like she was trying to exploit it. Like she was trying to use it for her benefit.
I tell you what, instead of getting in a back and forth, Gregory, I'm gonna let you go last, but let me get to the two hands, 'cause I think they're gonna have something to say on your question too, which was a very good question. But let me go to Spin. Spin, let's try to keep it to somewhere around a minute and a half, and then Pancakes, and then Gregory, it lets you kind of sum it up on what you hear on all this.
I kind of grew up a little confused because my grandmother was Chippewa Indian and my dad looked Indian. My mom was Scotch Irish. My brother was born with very olive skin. My dad had olive skin, and I felt very betrayed as a kid. Why? I guess it was because at one point I was daddy's little girl, so why didn't I look like daddy more than I did mommy? And even to this very day, I'm kind of angry that, I got as white skin as I've got, where I would have rather had the olive skin. And I can't explain it, but that's just how I feel.
Okay.
Okay, let's go to Pancakes.
So I've got a question on I guess the black thing. So how black do you have to be black? How many ancestors, or how much family makeup does it take to where's the break point? Where's the line between black and not black anymore?
I say it's changed over time. And depending on what time frame you grew up in, um, it it is what determines it. Like, I come from the school of the one drop rule. So, back in the days, if you had one drop of whatever black blood is, you were considered black. So that's kind of like the school of that I grew up in. Then I think it became, if you had one black parent, then you were black. And then, like I said, now it's this whole cultural shift right now in our culture, where it's like, okay, well, you can't, if you have only one black parent and your other parent is a different race or white, whatever, you have to call yourself a biracial now. You can't call yourself black. So it's shifting. It changes. But like I said, I grew up under the one drop rule. You had one drop of, again, whatever black blood is, you were considered black.
So then you're saying Elizabeth Warren would be Native American because she was 1/2000th.
Yeah, I don't know what that is, but I don't know what she was trying to do, but
She's spreading them feathers pretty thin.
No, it was very offensive. I'm not even Native American, and I mean something, but I'm not 1/16th. But
I doubt many Native Americans really give a shit about that.
I hope to. I don't know, because you see, there's this TV show, Crystal. You might be able to. I don't know if you've seen it, where they'll test, do the 23andMe. Like LeVar Burton was tested, and he found out that he has.
I've seen a few of those.
What was it?
I've seen a few of those. I mean,
she's seen the show that you two have seen. You're talking
I
about
don't
the
know.
same show.
I've seen it.
I
I
just
actually watched a couple of episodes recently with Emmett Smith and
yeah.
uh Blair Underwood, and like most most black people that have been here for generations, they have some European blood in them. Like I have European blood in me, but
Yeah.
I don't know.
Future. Upon notification of Senator Grutenhagen's compliance with the requirements stated in paragraph 1 above, the chair of subcommittee on ethical conduct must dismiss the complaint. Now, that's the proposal that has been put forward, and I guess the best way to say it this way, this is something that was brought up by Senator Kunish. And is it your motion for us to adopt that proposal as well as the motion to adopt the resolution, Senator Kunish?
It is, Chair.
Senator Matthews.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I thank you for working on what we did, that we're incorporating some ideas that I brought forward here. So I am going to support this resolution today. And then the only comment that I want to make is that this resolution is silent on the issue of probable cause. I wish there was at least some sentence in there. We didn't come to an agreement on that. And the reason for that is that this committee deadlocked 2-2 on that issue. I pretty firmly believe that there's no probable cause with what we found, with what was expressed to us yesterday. But we don't have agreement with the full committee on that point. So I just wanted to put that on the record. The resolution is silent. It is not making a statement either direction on the topic of probable cause, but it is a good thing to get this resolved, give the path forward to have this dismissed and not have this hanging over the work that the ethics committee needs to do, or that have one of our members of the Senate have this continue to hang forward on them. So that's my comments for now. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
And thank you, Senator Matthews. It's true that we think it's always important to recognize that when members are in conflict and there's a breach, that we try to find a way to resolve it and for us to be able to go forward, right? Recognizing even in there that even though we can do something and have no ill intent, it still can have profound impact on an individual. And we want to just recognize that as we consider this resolution. Any other discussions before I take the vote? Senator Kunis makes a motion that the committee accepts the resolution as articulated and read by me, that is dated May 8th, 2024. All in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. The resolution is adopted. Members, after or before you leave, it is the practice that each member sign the resolution, so that is something that is official for our records, okay? So make sure before you leave that you sign it. With that being said, I believe that is all of our business for the day. The next time that we will come together will be on June 10th. Excuse me, 12th. See, that tells me that everyone put it on their calendar. Everyone corrected me. I like that. The the Subcommittee on Ethical Conduct is adjourned. And it's
We live in a world full of experts, where politicians use fear to generate power for themselves.
We've already had over 290 mass shootings this year. That's more mass shootings than days in the year.
Where our media feeds us with misinformation.
And according to the CDC, the #1 cause of death for children ages 1 to 19 in this country is gun-related violence.
Tropes.
Where it will literally tear out the inside of the body.
Where those who make the rules seem to know the very least. Scary terms used.
Arm known as a ghost gun because it skirts most federal gun laws.
Don't be like this guy. Listen to the Range Minded podcast and free your mind.
With Joe Lanou live on X.
High school level, but they competed.
Yeah, I'm not entirely familiar with that case. I can't remember if that was the one that was they were female to male, if they were forced to play in the female league.
And take
because of that?
testosterone. That is the one, and I did not. I didn't find that until I did research for this show. That was a new one for me. But let me go through the list of where there are trans female athletes participating in women's sports. I'm just going to name the sports.
Okay.
Won't go into each detail of some of these. Just it's one person. It's one trans woman that is participating in the sport. But women's basketball, women's beach handball, women's bodybuilding, women's cricket, women's cross country, women's cycling. These are all women. Disc golf, dodgeball. Didn't know that was well, in Canada, evidently you can play professional dodgeball. Football, golf, hockey, lacrosse, MMA, mixed martial arts. I think that the leagues that they're allowing that to happen is getting smaller, and that hasn't been a good outcome for biologically female athletes. Mountain biking, powerlifting, roller derby, rowing, rugby, running. Didn't indicate Boston Marathon is what they count there. So I guess marathon running, women's skateboarding, soccer, softball, surfing, swimming, tennis, track and field, volleyball, weightlifting, and wrestling. And there's the only trans female to male athlete I know is the collegiate wrestler.
Got it.
So
Yeah,
that's quite a few sports.
It is, and obviously it's going to change from sport to sport. What is significant and isn't significant. You know, I myself, I'm about 6'6", 270 pounds. I've always been a very large person. And when I was a freshman in high school, I was like 6'3", 245. And whenever I joined, I loved wrestling. Thought it looked like the most fun thing to do. But one of the interesting things about wrestling is there's very strict specific weight classes, and I was already too heavy for the weight class for any competitions. I couldn't be in a sanctioned fight, right? So the only person that I could wrestle against was a senior at my school who just whooped my ass all day long in practice, basically. So and then I also played sports like baseball, where the height of someone doesn't really matter. Altuve can be better than Aaron Judge, right? So it's going to change drastically from sport to sport, right? Something like weightlifting, maybe even like cycling to rugby to football. Those are going to be sports you probably want to crack down on this a little more. Maybe do like really strict hormone testing.
I tell you what, Twink, we've got 2 hours. Let's break this up into some categories.
Okay.
Let's take the first topic of just a competitive edge.
Sure.
Does a trans male to female athlete, do you believe that they have an advantage, that there's an edge just by the pure fact that they were born a male?
So there's a couple of different factors here, right? It depends on if they've gone through male puberty, and it depends on if they're in a sport that will have very, very, very strict weight classing, right? So if you have someone on a rugby field, right, where you can have someone who's 7 feet tall, you can have someone who's 5 feet tall, doesn't really matter. Then probably if you have someone who's if you have someone who's male to female who went through male puberty, probably they'll probably have an advantage. But if you have a male person born male, they're a man, they're not trans, right, who's also my size versus someone who's born male, went through male puberty, who's about 5 feet tall, I would have a massive advantage over them, right? So I think that the distinction here comes that the person went through male puberty and is now in a sport that does not fit the designation of everyone else having gone through male puberty, you know. So I would probably say yes for the most part. I think that there needs to be a lot more testing, probably hormone testing, and probably needs to be some sort of regulations in some sports that involve having gone through male puberty versus not having gone through male puberty.
Okay. We take the case, I think the probably more famous, or the case situation with most notoriety, is the Leah Thompson.
Right.
She was required to take estrogen therapy a year prior to participating on the women's sports team. Obviously, had already gone through puberty as a male, participated in the collegiate male swim team, and then transitioned in after taking a year of estrogen therapy to participate, and is leading the pack. Leading the pack. It's typically wins most she hits the podium in most events that she participates in. Do you think the fact that she went through male puberty and only had a year's worth of estrogen therapy, you think that gives her an advantage? Or is she just a better swimmer?
Well, I think it's kind of hard to tell between whether or not the male puberty, or if she is just simply a better swimmer than everyone else. She also has a massive wingspan, I think. I think I heard that I forget exactly how tall she is. She's like near 6 feet tall, and her wingspan's huge. So, I mean, I think that she has the body for swimming, right? I think that going through male puberty does give someone a slight advantage there, and I've seen different studies that show the going through 12 months of estrogen therapy versus possibly wanting to make that longer to like 18 or 24 months or something. Again, I'm not incredibly sure about that. I don't think the studies are conclusive yet, but I would probably say that she probably has an advantage because of that.
Okay.
I just wanted
Folks,
to.
I neglected to hang on just a second, Bruce. I haven't introduced you guys, and my apologies. I was going through, we had the Minnesota thing going live, and I bobbled the ball. But guys, my co-host tonight is Bruce Wayne, and veteran LT3 sitting in the co-host seats. And we've got our backup contributors and co-host Grizzly, Big Ron, and John Cox. Those are the guys with the blue rings. They're co-hosts and contributors to the show for those that are first time. But go ahead, Bruce. You want to make a comment on this?
I just wanted to add so he was saying he wasn't sure on the numbers, and after 1 year of hormone replacement therapy, trans female will still have about 30 times the amount of testosterone in their system as a female does, which is equivalent to letting women use anabolic steroids essentially to compete.
Got it. Okay. Yeah. Like I said, I haven't read incredibly far into all the studies, so I don't know for sure, but that does sound like there's a significant difference there. Again, I think that the major contributing factor here is whether or not they've gone through male puberty. I think that you could probably put someone who's gone on male puberty through maybe even something like 3 years of estrogen therapy. I'm not exactly sure, and they'll probably end up still having more testosterone. I don't know for sure.
Because a male is going to start building denser bone
Yeah.
and body mass during puberty. Is that
Yeah, it's a
pretty much, I
larger
guess, the
heart,
prevailing thought of that?
larger lung, more fast twitch muscle, things like that.
Right.
And just there's certain things you can't overcome, like hip and shoulder width. Like females have a harder time doing pull-ups not because of their strength, but because the way their elbows go, because of their shoulder width. And there's
I've
just
read
certain
that,
things
yeah.
like that hormone therapy and even surgery can't really fix or change, I should say.
Yeah, but I know from my days in the Army that females can do setups, typically more setups and faster than men can because of their pelvic muscles and hip flexors.
I think one of the biggest
Just
things you got to
interesting
look
facts.
at too is men have fast twitch muscles where women don't.
I was unaware of that. What does that mean, a fast twitch muscle?
So men have a fast twitch muscle, and it's just part of evolution, where the muscles, the way the synoid in the muscle works, it allows it to move faster and with more power than what women do. It's just the way we're made up genetically, and kind of what Bruce is saying. Women also have a completely different gait and a different center of gravity than what men do. That's why when women swim, they swim completely different than what men do.
I was unaware of that. I guess that would help you with response times, fast twitch muscles, quicker.
Yeah, and that's why in cases you'll see where men can massively outrun women, outswim women. They have a better time at throwing. It's just all part of our genetic makeup where women, since they have a lower center of gravity, their hips are able to pivot to allow birthing. There's just a string of things that make us just so dramatically different.
You're telling me that women don't have fast twitch muscle, or are you saying that men have some that women don't?
I don't think they have it to the extent at which men do, and those fast twitch muscles develop during the first portions of puberty with men, as the testosterone is formed in the body.
Right. Yeah, I think I'm quite certain actually that women do have fast twitch muscle, but it is proportionately lower, like relative to the same proportion of difference in muscle mass between a man and a woman, right? I'm thinking it might be even a lower percentage. I don't know.
It's a different ratio, yeah.
I will agree with Twink that if it is before a male goes through puberty, that it can be a totally different scenario. Just like you were talking about the fast twitch muscles and them developing during puberty, but then you go into bone structure and, like you said, wide shoulders and the way the hips are and things like that. But no, I agree with it. I don't agree with it, but if a child was to do hormone blocking before they hit puberty, then it could be a fair shake in a competition of whatever sport they choose.
To clarify what I said, women have a larger number of slow twitch muscles versus men have a dramatically higher number of fast twitch muscles.
Okay, let's go to Spin. Hey, welcome, Spin.
Hi, who is the guest speaker on this?
It's Twink.
Oh, hi, Twink.
Hi.
I wanted to basically when a child starts these hormone blockers and they want, let's say it's a male that wants to, transverse to a female,
Okay.
and he starts the hormones that will block basically the testosterone and give more estrogen to the male. But what type of life expectancy are you looking at when you do this to a child?
It's a very good question. I, as far as I've read, there isn't a super significant change to life expectancy in the long-term testing, although there's not a crap ton of long-term testing to look at, especially whenever the transition starts before puberty. But as far as I've read, and I'm concerned, I don't think that it's too terribly much lower
Much lower than what?
than the general life expectancy of whatever it is in this country, 74, 75.
Oh, and where are you getting your statistics from?
I don't have it in front of me. I'm not exactly sure. I would have to research that more and look it up. I'm sorry.
Because sometimes estrogen-driven hormones can also cause cancer. So, what is the ratio of those that are transitioning that end up with a form of cancer in their breast or wherever?
You know what I would say on that in the general research that I did on this
Did
topic
you?
is that it depends on what study was done and who did the study as to what kind of answer you're going to get. I would say it's inconclusive that we don't really know the long-term effects of puberty blockers or preventing or reducing the level of puberty that a person goes through under these procedures. And it's relatively new. I don't think we've had people that have transitioned and have lived a full life to be able to study.
I think,
So I just don't know that. I think it's inconclusive. There is evidence on both sides from what I've seen.
yeah, I think it's only right, though, that they do start tracking these people as far as their health and things that turn up that are considered unnatural for that to be occurring at their age or whatever's going down. Because, like, for example, my mother, she died of breast cancer and it was estrogen driven. Myself at age 25, I had cancer and I had to have a complete hysterectomy. So then I was put on estrogen. When they found that my mom had the breast cancer, they called me up immediately and told me to stop taking the estrogen because I was going to end up with the same type of cancer.
Oh, geez. Well, I'm
Yeah, I
really sorry
think
to hear
that's kind of a side topic, and we can get
Oh,
into
okay.
that. I'd like to stick to just trans persons participating in sports of basically the gender of their preference, the gender that they weren't born to.
Because when
Um,
I spoke to another person regarding this, I've got a girlfriend that I've known forever. I grew up with her, and when she was 19 years old, she decided she was going to transverse into a male. She started out down the path with all the hormones and everything, and now at age 70, she has lost a tremendous amount of bone mass in her jaw area where she's had to go through rebuilding of the bone in her jaws because she had cancer in the mouth and her teeth all fell out. So, in order for her to get any teeth at all, she had to go through all this bone grafting. And it was all due to all these hormones that she introduced into her body to transition. Plus, she walks with a cane too because she's got osteoarthritis so bad. And she was told by her doctor that he felt that the hormones that she took, even though she started them at age 19, did some serious damage to her body.
yeah, I think that's this is a broad topic we could talk about if we're talking about transitioning from one gender to the next and the treatments involved in it. When we talk about trans in sports, though, let's go
Oh,
to the other
okay.
side. You're a female. You're a female, and you're a female swimmer. You're a female tennis player. You're a female hockey
Well,
player.
you know what?
And
To add to that, do you know she could beat, even though she had not transitioned yet, When we were on swim team, she could beat any guy on the swim team. When we were doing diving board, she could beat any guy on the high dive. When it came to sports, she was just as good as the guy was. And then, and then she came up with this, well, I want to transition. And it was kind of fun. It was funny, but it wasn't funny. But I said, oh my God, Jeannie, I said, you're blessed with all these, with having big boobs. I said, if you're going to dump them, can I at least have them?
Well, I don't. Does it work like that? I don't think it does.
Well,
It?
I was
Can't
kind of hoping.
swap them for another set.
Well, they could take the fat from, the breast tissue and go through a cleansing thing and redo it and then introduce it back into the breast system again. I don't know if they can do it to another person, but I know people that have taken a lot of fat from their body to build up breast.
Okay. But let's look at it from the point of view of a biological female who's participating in swim sports, tennis, like I say, or hockey, and you're on the collegiate level. Professional sports for women is not as lucrative as professional sports for men, but there are scholarships that are tied to these positions on collegiate teams. It's a lot of times it's where a female athlete's career is going to end because there's not a lot of professional sports outside of or professional applications of some of these sports for women or females outside of the collegiate circuits or collegiate level. You could go to the Olympics, but that's still once again about it. So it's almost like a female's athlete's time to shine in college or on a university team, and then here comes a Leah Thomas or here comes a biological male that's transitioning. Is that fair to them that a Riley Gaines, who would be a top one or two swimmer, when you add Leah Thompson in on it with a 6 foot something frame, large wingspan, and honestly, probably a more powerful swimmer, is it fair to them? Does this go against our Title IX that we passed in the 70s to allow females, women, and girls to participate in sports that were of a competitive category? They didn't have to compete with boys or men, or even Title IX just ensured that schools would have programs for girls and young ladies and women to participate in. Does this go against Title IX? Anybody, Twink? What do you think about that? On looking at it from a female's point of view, is it fair?
It's an interesting question. I'm not sure if fair is the way I'd necessarily describe it. I can definitely see how someone can feel scorned from that. But I also I remember playing sports in high school. I never played the collegiate level, but I remember playing sports in high school. And one of the lessons we learn super early on is that there's not fair doesn't necessarily exist in sports, right? At the end of a game, there's a winner, there's a loser, there's someone comes out on top, right? You might think you're big and strong, but there's someone out there who's bigger and stronger, right? Now,
Well, hold up. Let me push back on you. I'd say there is fairness in sports. We have rules. There are weight categories. They try to match you as evenly as possible. Like even in high school, on like a football level, a smaller school that doesn't have the funding or a larger group of high school boys to pull from to put their football team together, they compete with like-sized schools. So I would say that sports, they try to make it as fair as possible.
Yeah.
On that level. Now, is it fair that if you go with fair, does everybody get to win? No, there'll be a winner and loser in every contest. I agree with you on that aspect, but I think when it comes to actual organized sports, I think we try to make that as fair as possible. A fair competition. Let me put it that way. It's a competition. I say a fair competition.
yeah,
Would you agree with
yeah,
that?
absolutely. I completely agree with that, and that's why I'm a huge proponent of much more testing, much more close studies being done in this regard. Because one of the yeah, trans people make up, I think it's 1% or less than 1% of the total population, and then I mean the amount of trans people that are playing sports is significantly less, right? So it's a really difficult thing to study. But it I do believe that as more study, as more conclusive information comes out, we need to adapt our rule system for these sports, especially ones that require a lot of physical strength and one-on-one physical domination over, another person, like wrestling or football or something. Um, I think there's certain sports that maybe should, like golf. I'm not even sure if there should be a consideration for something like that, or I don't know, tennis maybe. Um, there's certain ones that I definitely think should adapt the rules as more stuff comes out. Yeah.
Well, yeah. Do you
Okay.
remember
But
the tennis match against? I'm blanking on her name. She's the world's top female tennis player.
Oh,
Serena
you're talking
Williams.
Serena Williams?
Serena,
Yeah.
thank you. And she played a match against like the 200th ranked man, and he came out drunk and he was smoking cigarettes in between matches, and he beat her. Like she said, she never been beat by so much before. So like there
Yeah.
are differences. There's a reason why.
well, how about one better than that? The U.S. women's soccer team was beat by a Dallas team of under 15-year-old boys, 5-2.
Yes, I do know what you're referencing.
So,
Yeah.
but I think there's a distinct advantage now, whether that becomes because they didn't they went through puberty or not, but I think there is a distinct advantage on a male female. Otherwise, why wouldn't we just have mixed sports altogether where males and females competed on the same field together? But let's get to some hands. I'm gonna go to Vet, Fidgy, and then Grizz, and then Spin. Go Vet.
All right. Well, I'll start with my daughter plays soccer. Um, and then my son, he plays high school baseball. And he played on teams that were co-ed at a young age, 8, 7 years old. And then when they hit a certain age, it was definitely a difference that you can see. So let's take the, people that have went past puberty and they haven't transitioned before then. It's going to be a definite advantage to that person. So if you're male and you're transitioning to a female and you do a sport like mixed martial arts, wrestling, even something like baseball, or well, it would be softball for that male. He's gonna dominate, or she, whatever you want to call, will dominate. I know that for a fact. It's just what it is. I've seen it. I've seen it when you hit that age group and you see, oh, okay, it's time for so and so's daughter who was great, who played great. Time to go to softball. They played baseball for as long as they could, and then they transitioned and went to go play softball because it's just a huge gap and a huge leap when it comes to certain things like power and strength in certain sports. Uh, I don't want to see my daughter have to compete with a male. If she decides to do soccer for a long time to college, I don't think that would be fair for her, even to go against someone that's been through hormone therapy for 12 months or whatever. It doesn't matter. Your bone structure, your growth, your hormone levels have been already introduced by puberty. I think it would be an unfair advantage. You're going to be stronger. You're going to be faster. There's videos of women or men that have transitioned to women beating the snot out of women in mixed martial arts, which you tested that earlier, Joe, that they're starting to limit that.
Well, let me ask you this. Mac Beggs, that's a trans male, female to male, participated in high school wrestling. Went to Life University on a collegiate level and wrestled. Now, I don't know. It's hard to find how successful Mac was once they got on the collegiate level with the wrestlers, but in high school level was pretty competitive,
Mhm.
and that's against boys.
Oh yeah, wrestling is a hell of a technique sport, like jujitsu. I've seen. I've been around martial arts most of my life. In jujitsu and certain wrestling grappling techniques, if you get the right leverage, doesn't matter. You can do that. Speaking of specifically sports that just take pure strength and agility and stamina, it's not fair. You want to talk about technique? Yeah, yeah, I can see that. I can tip my hat to that and see females definitely taking out males.
But let me ask you this, Vet: Are we complaining that this trans male has a lack of a competitive advantage because they were born female?
So you're saying that
I haven't. I had. You have to dig deep to find this
Mhm.
person. You don't see them on Fox News. They're not getting a lot of attention for their participation in a sport class that wasn't their biological birth. So, do we only have a problem when it's males participating in female sports, or do we have a problem when it's a female participating in? There a
I don't think it would
double
be.
standard?
No, I don't have a double standard at all. I don't think it should go either way, because it's just I just don't think it should be. Because let's say we do a sport like, let's say jujitsu or wrestling, where it's a technique sport, and you have a woman dominating, then she decides to transition and become a male, and she is whipping the ever living tail out of the male competition. I mean, if her technique is great and her hips and everything are helping her with hip thrusts, hip throws, and I don't think it's fair either way. I think you should be able to compete with just who you're born as. If you're born as a male, you compete against other males. You're born as a female. Now, if you want to create a whole sport with transition females and males, hey, there you go.
Well, that's in the
There's a
second
whole
hour,
money.
my friend.
Oh,
We'll
I'm
talk
sorry.
about that in the
Didn't mean to jump
second hour.
ahead. I apologize.
Let me go to Fiji. Welcome, Fiji. Do you have us, Fiji? Well, let's go to Spin so we get the audio figured out there. Go ahead, Spin.
I don't understand if, if we're going to be admitting people into, sports, why they can't create another category for trans people, period.
So the biggest issue with that is there's just not enough of them to create whole teams and leagues.
Then they're omitted. That's how I look
Well,
at it.
I think that's part of the issue is if you're a trans athlete, you're not allowed to participate in the your gender choice sport league, and you're not competitive enough to compete in your birth gender league. I think that's the complaint from the transgendered is that there isn't a place for them to participate. If you don't want us here or you don't want us there, then where do you want us? But we're going to talk about that in the second hour.
Okay. I'll give you a
Let me
break.
go to. I appreciate you, Spin. Let's go to Fiji. Fiji, are you able to speak now? If you're not, you may have to leave, close your app, and then reboot it and come back. Cause it's acting funky when I try to give you a mic, and I don't know if you can hear us at this point. Go ahead, Grizz.
Thanks, Joe. So, I guess I have a couple of issues. We kind of touched on what's competitive, and that it might be competitive if they start transition, hormone therapy before puberty. And then it would have to be in transition. They'd have to be in that therapy for 3 years and still might not be completely free of their testosterone. But for the sake of this conversation, we could say that would be complete. That therapy would be complete then. Is that right, Twink?
I think that was just an example that I gave because of the 12 months of hormone therapy evidently not being sufficient enough according to one study. I think that my greater point there was that we don't have enough sufficient study or evidence to draw
So it would take at least
exactly.
3 years. Is that what we're saying?
I don't know. Maybe I don't know.
Grizz, I think what we're saying is that there's been some studies on it, but I don't think there's been anything conclusive that says that at this point I don't know, I guess your hormone levels are competitive or matching the hormone levels of the gender of the sports you're trying to participate in. I don't think that
Right. Well, that's
there's anything conclusive
yeah,
there.
that makes sense. So okay, so it's probably fair to say then that it takes some period of time, like at least a year or two, right? Like it's not a quick deal. So you're talking about if you're going to start before they if you're going to start their hormone therapy before they're in puberty, you're talking about like 8, 9, 10-year-old kids making this decision. Like, how does an 8, 9, 10-year-old kid even know, even have a notion like that they want to transgender?
That's an incredibly difficult question to answer. I'm not exactly sure. I know that it, I think there's a reason why it's extremely rare. Is that it's almost impossible to make that kind of a decision.
Right.
Even
That's
even
kind
when
of
you're
where
an
I'm
adult,
going with
that's
this.
yeah.
Where I'm going with this is that it's an exceptionally rare condition, and it, I mean, it seems from a logical level, from someone who doesn't have any firsthand experience in any of that, it seems entirely unlikely to me that an 8-year-old. I mean, we don't let 8-year-olds make any kind of life-changing decision or activities on their own without their parents' input, right? Like we just
Right.
don't, because they're just not ready for that yet. So why would we think?
Well, now that's not true. There are laws in Colorado, New York, and Minnesota
Yeah.
and California that would actually take that decision away from the parents and allow the child to as young as 8 years old
Right.
make
I
that decision.
understand. Okay, so let me rephrase that and say historically, um, as the rational part of our culture would not allow their children to do that. We have laws in recent years from the progressive folks that would like to take that out of parents' hands, and I'm entirely opposed to that. But this isn't about my opinion. So what I'm getting at is we're taking somebody with an exceptionally rare condition at an age that it's arguably not appropriate for them to be making a life-changing decision, and allowing them to make a decision that is going to alter the life of hundreds of people moving forward, right? Like if like this 10-year-old, 8-year-old, 10-year-old boy wants to transition, and who knows, maybe he's an early sprouter and he's already got testosterone, whatever. I don't know. It's a kind of irrelevant, all the specific details and levels, but he's going to move forward and dominate his sport. And so our society went through this whole feminist movement and created women's sports because everybody agreed, yeah, that's kind of crazy. Like women can't compete with men. And now we're going to allow a child to make a decision that changes the lives of all those girls going forward, right? And I'm talking about changing their life in terms of their ability to aspire to something that they love and to feel good about themselves and have that sort of self-confidence and feel like a champion. So I have a problem with that, number one, right? Like everybody has their rights and you have your rights to do it. And I'm not like, if a 25-year-old guy wants to become a woman, God bless him. Like, go do your thing. I have, you know, it's your life. You do what you want with it. But when exercising your rights infringes on my rights, then it's a problem. And so what about the rights of all these girls that now will not have an opportunity to rise to the top? So that's issue number one. Issue number two is, I'm inclined to agree that you can do more studies, but I know enough about studies. I used to work in pharmaceuticals. I used to do IT consulting and whatever. Yeah. So scientific studies, peer review studies, blah, blah, blah. I can engineer a study to achieve any result that you want to achieve. And that's the game that the whole, that the government and special interest group plays with studies and statistics. Just because it came from it's a study and it came from some highly esteemed academic institution, the world is supposed to accept it as gospel. And I will tell you that is horseshit. So where do we go with this study, and how many people are impacted in the decades of studies that would be required? And does that seem appropriate, that we should be impacting people at that scale for a handful of people? I'm not
I think,
opposed to
Grizz,
inclusivity. I mean, on a notional level, I agree with that. But if it's adversely impacting huge numbers of people,
well, I think that's the topic of debate, not just in this space, but it's that's being held in a lot of places, especially on governing boards and associations that put together rules on what's fair and not fair in these collegiate sports. Hey, let me go to Fidji. Fidji, how's your audio? Been having some issues with you. It shows you that you're a speaker, but it shows your mic is muted. I guess we're still working on that. Let me go to Robbie and then Crystal. Welcome, brother Robbie.
Hey, brother Joe.
By the way, Twink, you're a panel speaker. You can jump in anytime that you want to rebut on any of these speakers, but I'm gonna move around on the hands. If you don't have anything to say, it's fine. But if you want to jump in, you're more than welcome.
Noted. Thank you.
Go ahead, Robbie.
Okay, no, thanks. Hey, everybody. Yeah, I think we're just complicating this. It don't need to be any kind of scientific studies. The only scientific study that needs to be done is to look between your legs and see what you got.
I can't hear Robbie. Can anyone else?
Oh.
I can hear
anybody
him, yeah.
hear me?
I can hear you.
You want me to drop down?
Yeah,
I can drop down. I can drop down. It's all good.
I can hear you.
I hear you too.
Hey, you want me to keep going? Or
Yeah, go on.
Go on, Robbie. We
okay.
can hear you.
Okay, yeah, I'm just saying we don't need to complicate this. Look between your legs and see what you got. You either got something or you don't. So I mean, this whole thing I think is when we comparing like strength and skill set and ability and all of that, I think that's the wrong premise to start with. We need to start with the dignity and the nature of man and woman. Having somebody that's mentally ill who thinks they are a woman who's transitioning and playing in a female competitive league lessens the dignity of those girls or those women, and vice versa. Like what the Boy Scouts are doing now, getting rid of the term boys and just opening it up to whoever wants to come in. It lessens the dignity of all the many men and boys who've come through that organization like myself and worked very hard to attain the rank of Eagle, which takes many years to do, and now it's just cheapened. So of course you can find we used to hoop back in the day, street ball, and we had girls that came and hooped and stuff like that. It was all good. It wasn't nothing like that. But at the same time, when nobody was going to physically check a girl the same way that we were going to check another guy. Likewise, if we played football, the rules were you do not tackle the girl, nor do you, be overly rough with her as well. You see what I'm saying? We included them, but there had to be some rules set into how we engage with the opposite sex. And if you were caught tackling a girl, you was gonna get your ass beat. That's just how we rolled back in the day. So doing this with these transgenders that are coming into female-dominated sports, and we are sanctioning it by saying, well, I don't really care what somebody does when they X amount of age, as long as they don't. That's the wrong argument to have too. We got to stop doing that shit. At a certain point, we got to draw a line in the sand and set some hardcore values and rules and say, hey, this is what it is. Because if we continue to say, oh, it doesn't matter, then okay, it don't fucking matter what anybody do. Let me go bust in somebody's house because it doesn't matter. Let me go rob somebody because it doesn't matter. let me go smack somebody's wife because it doesn't
But
matter.
Robbie,
Because
let
again,
me ask you this: are we still living in a free society when we force people to conform to what we think they ought to be? Why wouldn't someone be free in a free society to live their life how they choose? Now, I agree with you when it comes to robbing someone, or I believe I even agree when it comes to biological males participating in a biological female sport. I think it's an unfair advantage, but I don't know that I could go as far as saying that I think we should have laws or uh, some prohibits on how someone lives their life, whether we agree with it or not. Do you see it differently?
oh yeah, well, on the face value of what you said, Joe, that's true. However, natural law supersedes man's law, right? All the time. So if man's law is going against natural law, then whatever rights that man is creating and saying is okay is thrown out the window. So a case in point to that would be this topic that we're having, right? Man is saying that it's okay for someone who's mentally ill to be involved in female sports or vice versa. Natural law says no, that's not the case. Men are men and women are women, and there's that distinction there. So I have to lean towards natural law, even if that does infringe upon somebody's so-called freedom, because freedom, at the very heart of what freedom is the having the right to do what one ought to do, or to be what one ought to be, not what one wants to be or wants to do, because we do not have a license to do whatever we want to do just because a government says so.
Okay. Let me go to. I want to try Fidji again because we've had some issues. Fidji, can you hear me now? Can someone else try to talk to Fidji and see if she can hear them?
Fidji? Fidji, can you hear me?
Fidji?
I can.
Okay,
There
so
we
I
go.
hear Fidji. So I think
Yeah.
it's
Tell Fidji I can hear her. She
I
can't hear
just
me.
lost
She's been
you.
in and out of the space a dozen
Fidji.
times.
So
There we
Joe
go.
said,
It's coming
can you
in and
hear
out.
Joe? Can you hear
Joe,
Joe?
can you say something? No, I can't hear
Fidji
him at
test
all.
1 2 3 1 2 3.
I can hear
Crystal,
all the other
tell her we can
speakers,
hear
but I
her.
can't hear Joe.
Okay, yeah. Apparently it's just the two of you.
Just
I
ask her to
guess.
go
Yeah.
ahead.
Fidji, you can go ahead.
Okay. Well, I just had a couple of notes. I absolutely agree with Robbie on a lot of that, and that's from personal experience. I think if I don't have a problem with trans being in games, and when I say games, I mean like pool. If I play a male, probably 85 to 90% of the time I'm going to beat him, right? And it doesn't matter if I'm female or male. But when you're coming to sports, I think that's a whole different ballgame. You're talking about the physicalness of it, and with puberty happening earlier and earlier, you can't say when one person will go through puberty and put that as a blanket thing for everyone, because that's simply not true. There was a case where a 10-year-old girl got pregnant when I was 12. That would have been unheard of. That would have been extremely rare. Now it's much more commonplace for girls to enter puberty at a lower age than it was, say, 30, 40 years ago. So I don't, to say that guys aren't going through puberty younger as well, I would find that kind of hard to believe. And because they might be entering puberty younger, then if they start a transition at, say, 10, 11, 12, then they may have already started their puberty. So they've already gone through, what was it? You were bringing up a fast twitch muscle. I was kind of reading up on that when that happened. So, I'm going to land there for right now. I know I'll put my hand up again and be like, no. But I don't have a problem in games. I do have a problem in sports. I know when I played soccer for about 25 years, and I played both outdoor, indoor, and intramural, and I was a goalie. And I could play goalie in women's sports. I could not play goalie in men's sports. I mean, it was disallowed, especially in the intramural leagues. women were not allowed to play against men because men were so much more powerful than women were. And as a goalie, I've broken wrists and all my fingers and everything else just against girls. I can't imagine what the power of a kick of a male would be. And even one who started transitioning or something, males are just too powerful compared to women. They really are. And I've seen it over and over and over again. I just don't think they belong in our sports.
Thank you, Fidji. I don't think you can hear me, but maybe somebody will pass that along to you. Let's go to Crystal.
Joe says thank you, Fidji.
Hey, I too agree. I don't believe that trans women should compete against biological women in sports. I do not. Um, Also, I'm coming from the aspect kind of in conjunction with Grizzly, in that these women are not, a lot of women are not being given a choice in these situations. They're being told, like, if they complain, then they'll get in trouble or they won't be able to compete. We just had 5 middle school girls, whatever. They were competing in the shot put, and they refused to compete against a trans female, and they're suspended from being able to compete because they took a stand and said this wasn't fair. So, like, for women to be told that they cannot complain, or if they say anything, they'll get in trouble, they'll lose their scholarships, like Grizzly was saying, for a couple other people. And I'm sorry, when it comes to Leah Thomas was 500 on the boys side, and then decided in a year that he was going to transition and then compete on the girl, and now he's number one, number two. Like, I have no respect for that individual, because to me, and this is just my opinion, that in that particular case, and then on top of that, um Leah's walking through the room. He still has a penis. He's walking through the changing room with other females with his penis out. That's unacceptable. That's not okay. So I have no respect for that particular individual. Period.
But Crystal, does it make a difference if it's a feminine penis?
No, it doesn't. He should not have his penis should not be out in a change room. That's supposed to be a safe space for women. His penis should not be out around women. That's just not okay. Like, it wasn't like they had if they had a separate changing spot for Leah to change, and it wasn't around the other women. That whole situation is just like that. Leah's particular situation in general is just I just have no respect, because ultimately, you didn't come from you was 500 on one, so you came over here to compete with women, because you knew that you were stronger, you could beat those women. And I have no respect for that particular situation. But bottom line, that particular situation is just infuriating to me, when it comes to Leah Thomas. But yeah, just a lot of other things that are going on in relation to women being stifled. They're losing out on opportunities that would have been to them, because they're being quieted, and they're being essentially threatened in a lot of ways. And that's a problem for me. So no, I don't agree that as if you're like puberty, yes, children, there's not much of a difference there. They can compete in sports, but once that puberty hits, nah, you gotta find something else to do. And if well, we'll talk about that later, but I also agree that they should open up a separate arena, and then maybe you will get some more. Like, you have to make the space open. You may get some more athletes, but like, this whole argument of there not enough athletes, but you're not opening up the space to potentially see that there are other athletes out there, that want to compete, in sports in a category made for them. So you're not even giving them a chance to do so. And I do also find it very interesting. Like, you mentioned one trans man today, but it's overwhelmingly trans women, and not so much the trans men trying to bombard their way into men's spaces. And I do find that quite interesting, but I'm gonna go ahead and land on there so some other people can talk. But nope, I just don't think it's fair.
Thanks, Crystal. Guys, we're at the top of our first hour. If do me a favor, let's retweet this out. I don't think we've gotten the word out on this. We're a little short on the guests that we normally have. But if you'll retweet it for me, and also make yourself a note, tomorrow we're going to have Charles, who worked on the SR-71 program for his entire career, some almost 30 years. We're going to go over the development of the SR-71. For those of you who don't know what an SR-71 is, it is the world's fastest airplane. It's a reconnaissance plane that was developed in the late 50s. And I've gotten mixed bag of whether it's actually still in service or if it's actually been retired. If it's been retired very recently. But it's a very interesting airframe. Moves at some crazy speeds that are so fast that it heats the skin of it up. That's the thing that keeps it from going any faster than it could go faster, but they can't go any faster than it does. It will actually burn itself up. But that'll be tomorrow, same time in our space, our night court show. We're going to have Charles on, so make yourself a note, and I'll get the reminders out for that. But come and check it out. It'll also be a simulcast video show. We'll have some videos and some information on the SR-71 that we'll be able to look at. But let's get to some hands again. Let's go back to I think it's Phil. Go, Phil.
Sorry. This I'm only speaking anecdotally. When I was a junior in high school, we had a girl come on a JV team, and she barely lasted 2.5 weeks, 3 weeks. She got her butt kicked, and that's the issue. When people transition at an early age in high school, they're doing it after puberty. And again, I don't agree with it. I don't agree with hormone blockers. I don't agree in transitioning kids at a younger age to play sports or whatever. But when kids are doing it now, they're doing it after puberty, and they have that advantage against girls. I don't think it's the right thing to do. Because when I played sports, I started playing Little League at 7 years old. I was playing youth basketball at 7 years old. I was doing Pee Wee football at 7. I was basically an athlete until after high school. And none of these girls can compete. There were some girls that can beat me in track, yes, because they had more endurance than I did, but not really. And that's the thing when I see trans women in girl sports is that competitive edge, that hormones they have, it's going to outdo the girls. Because again, there are males and they became females about a year ago or 2 years ago, and that's a competitive disadvantage for them. And we're setting girls back decades by doing that because they don't have that competition anymore. They don't have that that award anymore. Because those spots are limited for the females, and they're getting taken away by trans women. That's just not fair, and that's why I crashed my plane.
Thanks, Phil. And just to be clear, you participated in male sports in high school, right?
Sometimes.
Okay, fair enough. We're going to go to the last two hands up, and then I'm going to give Twink an opportunity to respond to everything we talked about in the first hour, and then we're going to reframe that conversation and take it in a different direction. But let's go to Lawyer Joe. Welcome, Lawyer Joe.
I think I have to drop out again. I can't hear anyone.
We hear. I hear you.
I can hear you. Yeah, I hear you.
I can't hear Joe. Thank you, God. That was
Yeah,
nice.
I can't.
So Joe's the problem because I hear you fine.
Somebody let the counselor know that
All I was going
she
to
can
say
go
is
ahead.
I also have an anecdotal experience. I was a competitive power lifter throughout high school and my first year of college, maybe. And I, at one point, held the record in Ohio for the heaviest bench press in my weight class. Like there wasn't a woman in the state who could beat me. My heaviest lift was what some of the guys warmed up with before they even got into their real stuff. And there is no way in hell if I was going to go into a competition and do a squat. I mean, I could squat a lot, but a guy the same size as me can squat 50% more just regularly, not even as a special like training. So it terrifies me what's going to happen to girls who we separated sex and sports for a reason. It has to do with biology. Girls aren't they're going to get hurt really bad. And I'm afraid it's going to take something like that until this bullshit goes away. There's absolutely no room. If you want to make a third open league, make a third open league, but don't. It's completely wrong to allow biological males to compete with biological females. I'll
Well,
land there.
Joe, it's already happening. Did you see the high school basketball team where the trans woman injured three girls so badly that the entire team had a forfeit?
Oh my God, I didn't see that.
Yeah. This is a couple weeks ago, maybe a month ago.
Well,
Do you remember
Lawyer Joe
where?
can't hear
I
me,
want to
but
look
there
that
was
up. That's insane.
I'll look it up for you.
Oh, thanks.
Lawyer Joe can't hear me, but there's a Canadian
I still can't hear Joe.
bench presser
He's
that just set the Canadian record for bench pressing in the female category. But let's go to Spin. Go ahead, Spin.
Well, first, I'm wondering what a female penis looks like, Joe.
I didn't say female. I said feminine. It's just
Well,
a term that I've seen that
same.
evidently it makes a
It's
difference.
kind of the same thing, though. I mean, feminine. Okay, I have yet to see what a feminine penis looks like. You know, a lot of you don't realize this, but well, in my era, I grew up with Renee Richardson. I don't know if you know who she was. She was a famous tennis player, and Christine Jorgensen, who lived not far from where I grew up. Both of them. It's strange how they both ended up near where I grew up. And they played in sports, but yet there wasn't all this contention around them be involved in sports at all. No one was saying anything. Now people are speaking up. And, I wish I were on was it Phil that said that, if the women were going to play in the sports with them, that the rule was is you had to go gentle on them.
I didn't say that. That wasn't me.
Oh, that wasn't you?
that
Well,
was
I know.
that was Robbie.
Oh,
He's
Rob,
talking about
yeah.
playing in the neighborhood with like his friends.
Where I grew up, the boys didn't give a crap if you couldn't take it or not. You were gonna get hit. You were gonna get hit. It was just, you wanted to play with us. You wanted to play football. Then if we take you down, we take you down. There wasn't any special rules when I grew up. But then I'm probably a lot older than most of you here. And but yeah, I would have been wanting to be on Robbie's team. But yeah, this is really becoming a huge problem, and it in order to stop it, I think we got to get rid of the teachers union, because they're the ones that are spreading this BS within the school system of these children that are making it okay. And I think it's just another way for the government to weaken a gender. And I'll
Okay,
land my plane there.
Thanks, Spin. Twink, we're going to change directions on the conversation. You want to give kind of a summation or just comments on everything that you've heard about the last half hour?
Sure. Yeah, there's been a lot of stuff. I think of this stuff that I've heard, I am or I would be in favor of trans or third open leagues. I think it would be interesting to see if the theory of opening up the space would actually bring more trans athletes in. But again, I have to fall back on right now. There's just not a ton of data to support anything that would support that. Basically, I think that another thing that I heard that I want to touch on, there you don't hear a whole lot about trans men in sports, and the reason for that is not necessarily because I think that they're so much more rare than trans women. I think it's because they just don't make the news, and certain opposition news cycles will uh, not not cover them. You have that one story in Texas, but that I think the reason that that hit the news was because it was a trans man, a born female to male, um, that was forced by a certain regulation put in place to go back and compete against females in wrestling, and that's why that made the news. But Otherwise, there's just not a whole lot of news covering trans men or at all, really.
To be fair, I specifically looked for male transitioners in male sports. That's the only one that I could come up with. It's got, well, anything. I won't say any notoriety, but anything at all.
Yeah.
If there are others out there, I would probably venture to say that they're not making waves or breaking records in male categories in sports. And
Well,
that
and another
may
thing,
be a sign as well. That may be an indicator as to whether there's a difference in the genders or not.
maybe, but there's another thing that makes this really, really, really hard to study. Privacy laws make it very difficult to know exactly how many trans, even really how many trans people there are. A lot of what you hear are estimations. But especially people that are under the age of 18, privacy laws are massive. You're not really allowed to know anything about any minor in that way. There's certain things you can find. You can find like high school football stats, but there's certain things that make it nearly impossible to find information like that. So it's very hard. If something doesn't make the news, it's hard to hear about.
Yeah, I agree. There isn't a lot of information out there. If it's happening, it's not being reported on, or it's happening in less frequency, dramatically less frequency than it's happening in the male to female sports.
Right.
But let's talk about Title IX.
Joe, I got one quick thing to say.
Go ahead.
So there was one instance, and I just posted in the Jumbotron, where they did create an entire swim meet competition for trans men, or sorry, trans women, and because they had enough, and all of the swimmers decided not to swim because they wanted to compete against women, and they didn't want to compete against each other. But yeah, you take from that what you will.
Interesting. I'll look into that. I see you linked it there. I'll have to read into it.
Joe, before you move on, I just want to say I wanted to give a little bit of support to my dude Twink over there. I don't agree with everything. Obviously, I don't agree with this at all. You know, men should play against men, women should play against women. But I will give him the fact that there's not enough data because it is a new trend. So I guess we will find out in the future if any of this is viable, or like Spin was talking about, what could happen to these people that have transitioned. I did not know if you were going to get into the fact that he mentioned about before they hit puberty, which means they're youths, which I consider, if you try to transition your kid or let them transition, that I consider that child abuse. Like if you were whipping your kid because you wouldn't let your 13-year-old, 12-year-old get a tattoo. Well, I wouldn't anyway. And that's something permanent, just like hormone blockers and things like that. But I just want to throw that in there. I didn't know if you were going that way in the next space, in the next hour or not.
We are definitely going to touch on that. What I'd like to move to is the purpose of Title IX, which is a federal law that says that any facility, agency, or educational system that receives one federal dollar, has to make available organized sports for girls, for females. Prior to the 70s, you'd have schools that they had no organized sport for females, or women, or girls. They should be a federal law required by university,
You're rubber banding really
and
bad, Joe.
let me reset quick. I'm having this, the audio is bad tonight. Give me just a second. Talk among yourself. I'm going to try to reset.
All right. Does anyone want to have some final closing words on the last topic while Joe resets?
I'll say that I did not know about. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Spin.
Oh no, go ahead, vet.
Well, no, I just didn't know about that.
I honor my vets, so I give my vets.
I know. I appreciate that, Spin. But no, Bruce, I didn't know about that swim meet that you mentioned. That was unique. Where'd you say that was again?
It was the World Cup swim meet. I'm not sure where it was being held. Oh, Berlin. And there were some trans women who wanted to compete, and then they said they couldn't compete against women, so they opened up their own league, and no one registered. And you can take from that what you will, like as to why they decided not to compete, but not one decided to sign up once they realized they couldn't compete against the women.
Because they can
No.
set records and get medals and be recognized by
You
beating
stole the
women.
words right out of my mouth, Joe. You stole the words right out of
They
my mouth.
they can't. I mean, they're not. They're just average if they're competing amongst themselves. They're nobody. They're just nobody cares. Just like
Exactly.
women's swimming, men's swimming generally, except for the Olympics, nobody really cares. Great, you did great. Like Riley Gaines, she's a great swimmer. She did great. Nobody knew anything about her before she was like absolutely wronged by everything that went on with Leah. So that's the only reason, I guarantee it, because they're like, no, if we can't compete against people we know we can beat, we're not competing. That alone lets you know no more trans athletes in opposite gender sports. None.
Yeah,
You had a chance.
I'm sure they would say, well, we felt like we were being discriminated against. Like, oh, you're saying we're not real women, but
They were
yeah,
given their own event. That's the opposite of discrimination.
well, but
They
you're
were
not.
given equal access to the same.
Yeah, but you're not affirming their identity as women, and I
Oh
think.
yeah, well they can go fuck themselves on that one.
How's my identity now? I mean, how's my how's my audio now?
You're identifying
Coming
as
clear.
I don't know. Is it feminine?
No, it's still asshole. Oh, sorry.
Your identity is clear audio, Joe. You're good.
You know what I wanted to add to this is because my girlfriend was transitioning, and it really affected me. Something. It just really did a number on my head. And I was reading up on journals, and it just depends too. I don't know where the doctor stood on his take as far as transitioning, if he was for it or against it. But, he made the claim that once you started doing the female hormones and transitioning from a male to a woman, that you lost so much muscle mass that there was no unfair competition going on when they did compete in sports. Now, again, I don't know where the doctor's position was regarding his stance on, transversing or not, but that's what I was the take, from what I had read. And that was basically all he really wrote in his medical journal. And I'll land my plane there.
Well, yeah, and there is
Tank.
evidence that the body does change, especially like people are saying before puberty. There's no question that you have more fragile bones. Your bone density gets a lot worse. Your chest doesn't develop properly, fully, muscle mass, things like that. But my problem with that is then you're forcing children who cannot consent to commit to something that they have no idea what they're committing to. And research has shown that 80% of people who, if you do not affirm their gender identity, 80% of them will grow out of it. And so you're setting 80% of people on a path that they will probably regret.
See, that's why I related it to tattoos. Like, would you let your 10-year-old, because they like Bugs Bunny or something, like, I want this tattoo on me, like that is permanent, that can damage themselves, that can like affect them when they get older.
Well, and
But,
a Bugs Bunny tattoo might damage your chances to have children, but it definitely won't negate them.
How
I
is
think
my
Pancakes
audio now?
wanted to add to- I think
You're back,
Pancakes
Joe.
wanted to add something.
I can hear you, Joe.
Okay, sorry about that.
But you
Big
know
issues with
what,
audio
though,
tonight.
when you look at the broader picture of this, though, I think Big Pharma is behind all of this, pushing the school systems and paying people to create an agenda for this to happen with children,
Well,
trying to do it behind parents'
Joe
backs.
Joe could probably, and I know Moni could definitely correct me on this, but I believe Scott Nugent was saying that
Right.
the peg, if you get a kid to transition at puberty, then they're worth $1.6 million over their lifetime.
And they're lifetime patients.
$1 trillion industry. Yeah.
They're on them drugs and things for life. So
Yep.
Yeah,
All
and
right,
you're
sorry.
right. It's Scott Nugent transitioned from female to male. I don't recall if it was at puberty or shortly after, but
No, she already
No,
had children.
later in life.
oh, that's right. Already had children, but she is definitely not a proponent for transitioning. She's it's caused a lot of strife in her life.
Oh my
And
God, it was horrible. When I heard her story, I was just like in tears listening to her.
Well, and she said her life expectancy is cut by about 20 years because of all the constant surgery she's having. But Joe, I'm sorry, I keep derailing us. You want to move on, please?
I do. I want to talk about Title IX. If you everyone hear me, I'd like to talk about Title IX. That it is um, a federal law that was instituted to provide a space and mandated a space that any institution that took federal dollars from the U.S. government had to provide organized sports for female competitors or girls, depending on the age level. The Biden administration has signed an executive order widening, opening up Title IX to include trans women or trans girls, however you want to look at that. Um, Seems to me that if we believe that trans female athletes have an unfair advantage because of body composition, being biologically born a male, whether prior or after puberty, does that not negate Title IX? By the way, it's being challenged, though. I think that'll probably wind its way to the Supreme Court. But what's everyone's opinion on that? And actually, I want to go to Twink first. What's your opinion on Title IX versus the allowing trans persons to compete in particularly female sports?
I believe that actually I have it right in front of me. The text in Title IX is very, very, very short and very succinct. No person in the United States shall, on the basis of sex, be excluded from participation in, be denied the benefits of, or be subjected to discrimination under any education program or activity receiving federal financial assistance. Um, I've read the proposed change that the Biden administration wants to put in. In my opinion, I think it's going to get shot down in the Supreme Court. I don't think it's going to get further than that. But I have a hard. I would need to hear more about how from the opposition about how trans women in sports or trans men in sports directly affects this or directly counters this or should be or how Title IX should be used as an argument against trans women or trans men in sports to have an effective argument. I don't think that it does.
You think because Title IX is so vague
Well, I
that
think it's because it's very. I I don't think it mentions it. All it says is that no person shall, on the basis of sex, be excluded from participation in or be denied the benefits of. Right. I don't think that trans women or trans men in sports necessarily excludes or denies benefits of anyone in educational programs in sports receiving federal financial assistance. So
okay. There are some state laws. Texas has passed a law that prohibits trans persons from participating in a gender of choice,
yes,
whether
they
it be
have.
male or female. I think Abbott signed that law not long ago, but that is something that has happened in Texas. Um, I will tell you that the spirit behind Title IX, and I'm old enough to kind of remember that I wasn't paying attention to a lot of political news at the time, but the spirit behind Title IX was to provide organized sports for female um, students.
Right, right. It was a a secondary addition to the Civil Rights Act. It was in the same vein. I will say I'm only 27 years old. I was absolutely not old enough around that time to, uh, I wasn't alive at the time. So I can only understand that from a historical context. I was not alive to understand it from uh, that kind of a living, breathing context in that way.
Yeah, no, I understand. I don't know that there wasn't a big topic back in the '70s on trans athletes for sure. But let me go to some hands. That's what I'd like to talk about. Title IX and it's still in the same vein. Is it fair? And let's talk about female athletes because there's not enough transitioning males in male sports to really hold a topic very long. So let's just talk about biological men participating after transitioning in female sports. Is it fair to biological female athletes? And keep in mind, let's talk about the girl who gets up at 4 in the morning at a young age and does this our swim practice and swims several times a week, working her way to try to pay her way to, or get a scholarship into college and to compete on a collegiate level, where they may have an opportunity to go into the Olympics. They're even now, as of recently, that college athletes can be paid for paid endorsements. So it could be a monetary issue in there if you're putting a bunch of medals around your neck, that maybe you could make some money at it. Is it fair to those athletes that have put in the years to be able to compete on that level for someone like a Leah Thomas? And by the way, Leah Thomas is not the only female swimmer out there that's scooting across the pool. We're seeing it in cycling as well. There's some world records that have been taken by trans athletes in certain cycling divisions. So it's not just swimming, but let's talk about swimming, because I think it's been the one that's the loudest in the news as of late, and one we may have more information on and can have a halfway intelligent conversation about. But is it fair to the young lady who put in the hours and worked herself into that level of Riley Gaines? Riley Gaines didn't decide a year before she wanted to compete that she wanted to jump out and start swimming and competing at that level. It took years of early mornings and late nights, laps in the pool to condition her body and learn the techniques that's required to be able to compete at the level that she is. So is it fair to a Riley Gaines? And let's go to Joe. Pancakes dropped out. I was going to go to him first, but y'all can let him know later that I did have him in mind. But go ahead, Joe.
Um, well, about Title IX came about in 1972, because I remember 2 years ago there were big like 50th anniversary celebrations of Title IX, and the thing is, I know what the trans athletes are going for in their argument that it's violating Title IX if they can't play. But the thing is the biological male athletes who are trans to female, they're not being denied access to sports. They're being denied access to women's sports. They are perfectly free to try out for any men's team, any co-ed team, anything that's not specifically designed for women. So they're not being like left out of anything. They're not being discriminated against and prevented from having equal access. So that's the part that keeps pissing me off when I hear about this stuff, because I'm like, no one's cutting off your access to it. It's in compliance with Title IX. And it worries me. I mean, being a weightlifter, I would have never, the only thing that would have happened is I'd have gotten my ass kicked, but there would have been no physical contact. And I think one of the reasons swimming is such a big thing, because those girls, like I listen to Riley testify, and those girls, they are butt naked. It's like, taking a shower in the army. If you have a lot of people, they're just stark naked, stripping down, and those swimsuits they wear, the competitive ones, are like liquid rubber that they have to help each other get into and put on and get off. So if you've got a fully intact male standing in there when you're doing that, absolutely not. I'd have had a hard enough time in a situation in a gym for a weightlifting competition, let alone no. And that's my biggest problem with it. And we know why trans men don't compete in men's sports. It's because they can't. They physically aren't able to. I'll land there.
I will tell you that I have lived a life that now we're having a conversation and describing a male as intact or not intact. I just want to make that little note there.
It's wild.
It's a wild
wild,
conversation
isn't
to
it?
have.
It's
But
crazy.
Counselor, let me push back on. Do you think the whole issue is modesty, or is it more like I watched an interview with Riley Gaines where she spoke about her and Leah Thompson tied, and they said, "Well, we've only got one trophy, so we're going to give it to Leah because Leah's the trans athlete." And then Leah got the photograph holding the trophy. Leah was the one, even though it was a tie, it was Leah Thompson that got the notoriety and the recognition for their performance that day. You don't think that maybe has a lot to do with it as well,
Oh,
as far as whether it be fair or not?
that absolutely does. I remember seeing that and then seeing the pictures, and Riley Gaines just looked absolutely defeated. and she should have. Like that was, but I'm just saying the reason swimming is why it seems like such a big deal there is because it doesn't have anything to do with modesty. One, it has to do with safety. I mean, like I said, these women, I listened to Riley explain how they get on their competition suits. And she's like, you've got 2 or 3 girls helping tuck things and push things. And she's like, to get into the suit and then to get out of it, it's the same. Someone's got to help with all that. And like, no one wants to help Leah because Leah isn't a woman. So, I mean, that's a big part of it. There is, I don't want to be naked. I mean, I was in the Army and there were only 2 girls in my platoon, so we got to take shower, just the 2 of us, and we got the same time as the guys. But if one of the guys was like, no, I'm a woman now, I'm going to come in here, I'd have knocked his ass out. There is absolutely no way. And then the whole, well, the trans athlete's more special than you, so they get the trophy. The fuck out of here. That's so disrespectful and so disgusting. And I'm so glad that Riley has national and international like recognition now for what she's done and what she's stood up for.
Yeah, I think it's set back women's rights 100 years. Like they fought for a long time to have female only sports. And really it doesn't even come down to competitiveness, whether it's fair, even playing field. It comes down to truth. Like, can a man actually become a woman? And no. And that tie that back into Title IX, the gender, the trans ideology, they make very clear gender is not the same as sex. And I would argue that they conflate them very often, and they mix them back and forth to whatever benefits them. But if you look at Title IX, it says no person in the United States shall, on the basis of sex, be excluded from participation. And so transgender, your gender identity, has nothing to do with your sex, so they claim. And therefore, I think you should have to compete with your sex. You can cut off the twig and berries, you're still a male. And
I hadn't even thought of it that way. I like that. That's fantastic. That they push the difference between sex and gender. And Title IX says specifically sex, which is the biological, like what's going on, not what's going on in your brain, what's physically on your body, in your body. I like that. That's great. Good job.
Well, let me throw another monkey wrench in the discussion, because that's exactly where I wanted this to go, and that is that Leah Thompson is not a male transitioning to a female. Leah Thompson is a female. That's the argument, is that you don't have to mess with Title IX. Title IX is that the trans athlete participating in a female sport is not contrary to Title IX because they are female. If you listen to the promo coming in, there was a speaker on there that's basically, she said that that's the argument. If you believe that a trans woman is a woman, then a woman participates in women's athletics. If you don't believe that they're a woman, then obviously that's where things start to get sideways. But what does everyone think about that? Is a trans person transitioning?
There's a slight difference. So they will often say a woman is your gender, female is your sex. So they will say, like, they just updated the, I believe it was Merriam dictionary, where they said a woman is anyone who identifies as a woman, which obviously is ridiculous. You can't define a term by using that word to define it. But they will say that women is your gender identity, female is your sex. So I don't think I've ever heard Leah Thomas referred to as a female. It's always been a woman.
Okay. So do we believe that a male transitioning into a female or a woman, is that a woman?
No, it's a
No.
trans woman. A trans woman is not a woman. They are a trans woman.
So you don't hold that belief, counselor, that transitioning makes them a woman.
Absolutely not.
Okay.
They still have the same chromosomes. They still have the same, they were born with the same genetic material, and whether they get their, twig and berries cut off and inverted that doesn't make them a woman.
Well,
And it
it's
does.
actually the most common transitioning. They don't have the twigs and berries, as you say, snipped. That is a very difficult surgery, maybe not quite perfected yet in some cases. So I
Yeah.
think the majority of trans women still are intact, as you said.
Then
Well,
they
can they have
absolutely not, they
children?
don't, they're not even close then. No, if you're going to do it, you either go all the way or shut up. Like do it or
Okay.
don't do it. Do or do. There is
I
no
want to go.
try.
I want to go to our guest speaker, our panelist on this, Twink. What's your opinion on looking at it that way?
Well, I'm not sure how much pushback I'm going to get on this. I 100% am a believer that gender and sex are different, and I don't agree. I have seen some advocates say that whenever a trans woman transitions, that they should receive the designation of female. I don't agree with that. I think that sex and gender are incredibly different, and sex is very biological. It's very chromosomes. It's right, gametes, things like that. Gender is a social, it's the social characteristics that surround what we commonly associate the two sexes as, right? Um, yeah, and I mean, I don't know how deep we want to get into this necessarily, but that's where I would draw it, right? When a trans woman transitions, they are taking on the social role of a woman, right? When a trans man transitions, they're taking on the social role of a man. They don't become a male or a female, right?
So,
Okay.
Twink, and I want to get to you, Crystal, but just real quick, Twink, what do you think about? So, because I believe they do conflate them quite often. Whenever I debate them, they're very clear that gender and sex are two different things, just as you very clearly, very well articulated. But then you'll see people like down in Florida, you saw them protesting because they couldn't change their sex on their driver's license. Your driver's license says sex, male or female, and they were protesting that they couldn't change that. How do you think they square that circle?
Well, I think that there's a lot. This is a huge topic on both sides. I think that there's a lot of activism for activism's sake, and I think there's a lot of anti-activism for anti-activism's sake. Um, so I think that there's certain things like that that I probably wouldn't even really give attention to. If you want to advocate for something like having, gender and sex on a driver's license or some kind of identification, I might be willing to concede to that. But I wouldn't necessarily agree with that particular protest. No.
I wouldn't be totally against having gender and sex listed because that would at least be logically consistent. But
Right.
let's go
So
to Chris.
essentially, you're cool with pronouns on your driver's license. So, excuse me, let me see your driver's license. They, her, they.
Is he,
Well,
she, is them?
well, why not? Because like otherwise you're either going to be because I care about the truth, and so I will. If you can legally change your name, I won't. I don't want to offend a trans person, so I'm not going to call them a man's name. You can legally change your name, so I'll call them by the name that they want. But I'm not going to call them she if it's a man. So I wouldn't be against saying, well, this is a man, but he wants to be like referred to as whatever, because at least that's logically consistent. You're not asking them to say that you are a woman, just that you prefer to be called that.
Sure.
But let's go to Crystal.
I believe that if you transition, you are a trans man or a trans woman. You're not a woman. You're not a female. You're not a male. You transitioned. So, and from as I understand it, you fought so hard for this recognition, and now you got it. So I don't think that's anything to be ashamed of. Like if that's what you did, I don't believe. I also don't believe in medically transitioned children. So like if that's what you did as an adult, then you are fine. But you are a trans man or you are a trans woman. And I wouldn't also be opposed to the driver's license thing, more so on the standpoint of like, say you get into an accident and you need help, the medical people need to know what you are biologically. Like that's important.
That
And
is a big issue,
yeah,
actually.
that's important. So yeah, I wouldn't be opposed to that on your driver's license either. Just for as a safety issue, like I said, you get into an accident, you can't talk, then they need to know. Now I disagree with you not helping them because of that. That's wrong. But the medical staff do need to know what you are biologically so that they can treat you appropriately.
I would hold that there is not a trans person out there that's fooling medical staff. Just saying. I
Actually,
don't think
Joe,
we've reached that level yet.
yeah, I got to push back on that. There actually have been cases, like Crystal laid out, where paramedics have overdosed the victim with certain drugs because they thought they were a woman and they gave them too much of a drug or something. Like there have been cases like that, like where they didn't remove the pants and they weren't certain. And but Crystal,
And also people making a fuss because like you have some trans women, not all, but some trans women that are suing like doctors because they want to go to a gynecologist, and it's like, no, you don't need a gynecologist, and they're trying to sue them for discrimination. So I do think it's kind of like important that it's understood what your biological sex is so that they can assist you appropriately.
Like, who wants to go? Nobody wants to go to the gynecologist.
No, Joe. And they ain't figured out a better way to do that in years, but we can talk. That's a conversation for another time. But
that's after parties conversation.
That is definitely an after party
But
topic.
yeah, I say you're either male, female, or you're a trans female, or you're a trans male. And I'm damn sure not calling nobody a they, them. I don't care.
Okay, but back on sports, do we think that it's fair? That's kind of a basic question. Is it fair to the female athletes, not taking in consideration of the trans athlete, because that seems to be a hot topic as well, as whether it's fair that they can't compete in the gender that they prefer or that they want to be assigned, or however that movement is. Is it fair to the young athletes that are participating on a high school and collegiate level, that they put in the hard work to be competitive and to be relegated to second, third, or no place because
Nope,
of
it's not fair.
trans athletes?
No, it's not fair. Not at all.
And is that contrary to Title IX?
No, because they're not being discriminated against based on sex.
Is that your legal opinion, Lawyer Joe?
Title IX, like B. Wayne pointed it out, and it makes perfect sense that Title IX says sex. The trans activist people, whatever you, constantly say, well, sex and gender are different. Sex and gender are different. Okay, well, then that defeats any claim they have for Title IX discrimination, because Title IX clearly says sex, and your sex is clearly what your physical biological body is. So I mean, if you've got male DNA, you are male, and that is your sex. So you're not denied access to sports based on your sex. I don't give legal opinions on here. I give my personal opinion.
So it's your personal opinion that it doesn't violate restricting trans participation in a female sport or women's sport or whatever gender, however you want to refer to it. You're saying that restricting them from participating in those organized sports is not a violation of Title IX, even though they say they are women.
It is absolutely not, because again, like B. Wayne, you're a genius on this one, bud. It specifically says sex and gender are different to them. Their gender, it has nothing to do with Title IX. It's their sex. What your sexual, whatever's in your DNA, whatever chromosomes you have, whatever.
I think the term is biological.
Yeah. I get so frustrated because I'm like B. Wayne just made the argument so much easier for me now. Is it legally says sex. So if they say that they are legally female sex, that can be disproven with a blood test. That can be disproven. So no, it's not unfair at all. They still have access to sports. They have access to the sport of the same sex, not gender, sex.
I'll tell you what, Bruce doesn't get that very often.
I
Accolades
know.
on how well he
I'm enjoying
articulated an argument. That's
I'm really enjoying it. I love you, Joe.
I'm
Love
sure.
it.
I'm sure when we have our meetings, he's going to be pushing for more transgender topics.
Oh, there's a few things I'm passionate about.
Is there
All
a
right,
way to make his head bigger on his icon?
we'll get the FT. I'm sure they can accommodate that circle to fit his head that's going to grow after this. But let me throw a hand grenade into this in the last 7 minutes. Yeah, I've heard a lot, and it baffled me for some time when trans activists speak about genocide, that the society and laws and the government are committing genocide on trans people. Well, then you look for like, where's this happening at? And I won't say there's not violence against trans people, but I don't see a systemic genocide in it. But going back and doing research on this topic, it kind of dawned on me. I think I know what they're talking about. They're talking about not allowing children to go through puberty blockers at a young age, because once a child goes through puberty and then transitions, they're never going to be, if you want to be female, you're going to start having masculine characteristics at puberty. And the only way to avoid that is to block puberty and prevent that from happening so that you stay more feminine looking, feminine frame, not the heavy laden muscles, not the production of testosterone that happens during puberty. That's what they speak of when they say you're killing trans, is that you won't allow them to, we as a society won't allow them to transition at younger ages. And remember, we talked about this earlier, and I agree with it. You're talking about children somewhere between 7 or 8 if you're actually going to stop them from going through puberty. But I know that conversation is going to go into the after party, but let's get it started. What's everyone's ideas on that? And I want to go to Twink first on this one.
Well, and just real quick, Joe, we got a celebrity in here. We got Scott Pressler.
I see the persistent there. Hey, Scott, thanks for joining us, brother. It's good to see you. I've seen some stuff on you here lately. You're making some waves out there. We like to see it.
But go ahead, Twink.
Okay.
I think that's what you said.
So about transitioning really early in life, that is an extremely dicey topic. And again, I said it before, I don't know if I am, I don't know if I can make that decision. I don't know if I can unilaterally tell everyone that, you can or you can't. I don't know. I think that again, it kind of has to be up to the child and the parents. If I had to decide one way or the other, that seems incredibly young. Um, I'm not even sure of any cases of children like actually transitioning from that age. I don't know of any. Most of the ones I've heard of happen in the high school years, and even that's kind of young. Um, so I don't know. I think you're correct about the summation of where the term transgenocide comes from. I think that is where the argument comes from on the other side. There's a couple of other things involving. We kind of touched on it whenever we were talking about trans people not getting the right care in the right situations in certain minute emergency situations when a doctor gets certain information wrong. And I think that those are more valid examples of that. And we can probably make very easy, deliberate changes to help divert those things. But about kids transitioning that young, I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah, so I just want to say there is I wouldn't say very common, but in terms of the trans population, it is fairly common for children to go on puberty blockers before puberty. The whole double mastectomy surgery type situation is far less common. You're right. It is usually around 16, still before the age of consent, but
Right.
it is less common. But the whole puberty blocker thing is becoming much
Well,
more common.
When you say more common, I think the last time I researched it I think this was last year. So from like 2013 to 2016, those 7 or so years, there were a few thousand cases maybe total that happened involving puberty blockers. I don't know. I don't know exactly what you're referencing when you say more common, or that if you can expound on that a
I
little.
was saying it's more common than the surgical procedures, like
Oh,
double.
100%, absolutely, yeah. I think the surgical procedures for prepubescent, I mean, I think that's like a double digits total. That happens so incredibly rare. That's
But I believe the argument is you don't need a double mastectomy if they allow the child to transition at such a young age that breast didn't
right.
develop. But
Well, and
let's
also
go
there's
to
just nothing to cut off at that age.
well,
But,
I think doing the and like I say, I'm not an expert at this all, but just doing the research on this topic, that seemed to be a reoccurring theme, and that kind of put it in perspective for me when they talk about genocide. I guess I kind of understand what they're talking about. I won't say that I agree with that, but I understand what they're talking about. Let's go to Crystal and then Spin, and we're gonna close this out and go to the after party.
So a couple of names. Chloe Cole, she had a double mastectomy at 14. She is a she's 18 or 19 now, and she does advocacy for she goes around and essentially speaks out among about children transitioning. She in Texas, there's a place where they were doing double mastectomies on children as young as 12. Um, Scott talked about it, and I watched another situation where they were talking about that. So, and of course, Jazz Jennings, we literally she started puberty blockers at 12. Um, she had her first surgery at she had her SRS at 17, and the puberty blockers essentially prevented her from developing a full penis, and so she had to have 5 surgeries, I believe, in order to make her whole. So they do say that it's better. Another reason why it's better to wait until they're older and have gone through their puberty of gender origin, because it is a little less invasive on them when they get older. But there's a couple of other younger people that had surgery. I mean, I consider the medicalization just as bad as the surgery, because ultimately we don't know what's one, they're becoming medicalized for life. They're telling them that these side effects are reversible, and they're not giving people full information. And then we got a lot of either self ID or like people literally going into meet with a psychiatrist 30 minutes and they coming out with people like, we just need to do better at the end of the day. But like I don't think, again, I don't think under 18 you should be getting anything medical. Social transition, without any medical intervention. But like the medical, I just don't think it's a good space to put a minor in a medical space, until I mean, even 18, I think it's early. But again, you're grown at that point. If you can go into the military and die for your country, then who am I to tell you, what you can and cannot do? But um, the bottom line, I don't think children should medically transition. Period.
hey, Spin, I see your hand up, but we're at the top of the hour. If we could let Joe give his closing monologue, if you would be kind enough to be willing to
Sure.
Yeah,
end
guys,
this
let's pick
party.
up this conversation in the after party. Give us 5 minutes after this ends. And Grego, I saw you, just brought you up as a speaker. We're going to close this space out. We have what's called an after party for those that don't normally come to our show. And we'll pick up this topic, and it's a little looser. We can move a little faster around in that space. So I encourage everyone to join us in the after party. And we're going to pick up Brett when we left off. But I do want to close it out with just my assessment on the research and listening to the conversation in here tonight. I feel a lot of the same sentiments that Crystal does. I feel like if we're going to be a free country, We can't dictate how people live their personal lives. I don't want the government. I don't want laws. I don't want a bureaucracy or, by God, an elected public official to tell me how to live my personal life or to tell someone else how to live their personal life. When it comes to trans athletes participating in female sports, I feel like we are bending our knee to less than 1% of the population, and even less of a percentage of that 1% that participates in these sports, at the sacrifice of our female athletes, or our ladies that are participating, especially on the collegiate level. Recently, they've opened the way for college athletes to be able to catch endorsements. This could be life changing. This is what you get up at 4 in the morning and you swim the laps for. This is what you sacrifice for to be able to compete at that level. A collegiate swim team, even on a women's team, is not something that you're going to walk up there one day, throw your swimsuit on, put your swim cap on, and jump in and be competitive. These are young ladies that have been doing this since probably before puberty in a lot of cases, where they're hitting the gym. They're putting in the sacrifice to get it done so they can compete on a collegiate level, so they can compete on an Olympic level. I think when you interject a biological male into that, I think it's unfair competition. I'm not opposed to a third league. I'm not opposed to something else, but I think what we're doing now is not fair to the ladies or the women that are participating in that sport. I think it's an extremely complicated topic, and I want to give my hats off for Twink for having the courage to come into a room, because you don't know what you're getting into on this, and there's not many proponents on his side in here. So I want to commend you, Twink, for coming in, and I appreciate your conversation and your opinion on everything that we discussed tonight. For those that are new to the Night Court with Joe Lanou and my night crew, that's what we put these spaces together for. I want opposing views, but I want a respectful discussion. We don't talk over each other. In any personal attack, we'll have you removed, because it's essentially, I don't like to say safe space too much, but it is a safe space to have these discussions, whether you agree with the majority of the room or not. So, Twink, I want to appreciate you, and I also want to commend you on something that you said. You believe that, and I have adopted your opinion, by the way. You've convinced me on this for sure, that you believe there's a lot of activism for the sake of activism. I think that as long as we have people stirring up the waters and keeping it muddy, it's going to be very difficult for us, for a society, to find our way through a situation like this that's equitable for all. I think that more conversations like this need to be had, whether it's an uncomfortable conversation or not. Those are sometimes the most important conversations that you need to have. But folks, we're going to end it here, and I do this for some recording purposes. But we're going to pop open another show. We call it the Joe Lanou After Party. Anybody wants a direct invite, shoot me a DM. I will encourage you to follow everyone in here. We've got Moni's a great follow. I'm just looking around the room. Everybody I see that I know in here that are great follows. And let's don't forget, I think he jumped out on us, but Scott did leave. But Scott's a great follow, extraordinary gentleman doing some great things out there for us. But if you want a direct invite, shoot me a DM. I'll get you a direct invite to the after party. Give us about 5 minutes. I need to freshen up a drink, use the bathroom, and stretch the legs. And then we'll get back into this discussion. And the after party, like I say, is a little looser. We'll move the conversation a little faster. Thanks, folks. Thanks for attending, and thanks for a great conversation. And I'll see you in the after party.
We live in a world full of experts, where politicians use fear to generate power for themselves.
We've already had over 290 mass shootings this year. That's more mass shootings than days in the year.
Where our media feeds us with misinformation.
And according to the CDC, the #1 cause of death for children ages 1 to 19 in this country is gun-related violence.
Tropes.
Where it will literally tear out the inside of the body.
Where those who make the rules seem to know the very least. scary terms used.
Arm known as a ghost gun because it skirts most federal gun laws.
Don't be like this guy. Listen to the Range Minded podcast and free your mind.
Kingdom Radio is now scheduling interviews for the 2024 season. Make sure you visit us online at whykingdomradio.com. Get busy.
Night Court with Joe Lanou live on X.
Hey folks, it's Joe Lanou coming at you live. We're going to take about a 30-minute break and we're going to retrofit and reconc this for our evening program. Join us at 9 o'clock Eastern. We'll be talking about the SR-71 Blackbird, the fastest jet airplane in the world still today. We've got a gentleman named Charles who actually worked on that program his entire career, more than 20 years associated with the SR-71 or Blackbird program. So join us. We're going to take a 30-minute break, but come back. We'll have some intros into that, a little background on the SR-71 before the show starts. But 9 o'clock Eastern, that show will go live. We'll broadcast it live on YouTube. And also on X, and also there'll be an X Spaces associated with that show. So there'll be essentially a studio audience that can ask questions, and you can be a member of that studio audience. But you guys take a break too. We'll be back in about 30. Thank you.